What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Pizza Buffet live here on Forward Progress, part of the Hammer Betting Network, proudly presented by Fanduel. I'm Rob Pizzola. Today, we've arrived at Championship Sunday. It's just 3 games left in the NFL season. And today, we'll know what the Super Bowl matchup is going to look like. Good morning to everyone out there. See a lot of you in the chat. I have some comments pinned that I want to get to over the course of the chat. John, Baddest Planet, All Day Capper, Lord McD, Johnny, Stephen Robinson. Good morning to all you out there who are watching the Pizza Buffet this morning. Now, reminder, the market is pretty sharp. This week's market is as sharp as it gets right now. It's game day. Efficiency is at its peak. Let's face it, winning isn't easy. But I'm going to share my thoughts with you for each one of these games. Some betting angles, some prop looks. Take everything with a grain of salt today, though. Take everything with a grain of salt. I don't have a bet on the side or total. I will of either game. I'll talk through that a little bit and why not. I'll share my numbers, the entire ordeal. But please bet responsibly today on Championship Sunday. I'm going to start by breaking down the handicap for each matchup. I'll analyze some key factors, and then I'll look at the props towards the end of the show, especially some ones that stand out on the FanDuel menu as well. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Drop your questions in the chat, your leans, insights, whatever you want to talk about. Drop it in the chat. Your participation takes this show to the next level, and I really enjoy doing that. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share this video. Your support means the world to us, helps us keep delivering the best content here on the Hammer Betting Network. Now, before we dive into Championship Sunday, John Smith asks, is this the last Pizza Buffet of the season, Rob? It is not. I will do one on Super Bowl Sunday as well. Now, again, Super Bowl Sunday, we're going to have a really efficient market, but that'll be a big props day for a lot of you people out there. So Super Bowl Sunday, I will be doing a Pizza Buffet as well. MJ says, Rob, tell me the Chiefs won't go all the way. I'm not going to tell you that because I think they're going to go all the way. So many people want the Chiefs. This reminds me of me like 15 years ago, just hating the Patriots, rooting against the Patriots, betting against the Patriots. And guess what? I mean, the Patriots, they didn't always win, but they were always there. They were always there. Really reminds me a lot of that. Stephen Robinson says, the way all the shows, not just Forward Progress, have been talking about Commies Eagles, you would think the Commies were the team that was favored and took money. So much Commies love and Eagles hate. I don't see it that way. I see it more so as more uncertainty on the Eagles side and less willingness to back them. I have seen, I know of people who've bet the Eagles this week. I have seen some sentiment towards the Eagles. I just think that game is shrouded in uncertainty. But let's get into it. Let's dive into Championship Sunday. We'll start Washington, Philadelphia. The beauty of today, we don't have any significant weather games. This is pretty mild for Philadelphia temperatures, 40 Fahrenheit. Little bit of wind, 10 to 15 miles an hour over the course of the game. Nothing crazy. Nothing crazy here. You see my numbers up on screen. I make Philly just under a 6-point favorite, 47.4 the total. Of note, this total did get steamed down this morning. All the 48s and 47.5s got taken out. We're pretty much at 47 flat across the market. In a similar vein, we haven't come off of the 6 for the Eagles. And someone asked before the show, is there a chance that we're going to get potentially a commie 7? I just don't see that happening. That's not to say there can't be late money on this game, but we see a pretty consistent number across the board here. FanDuel 6.5 minus 102. Most books are at 6. I think that's the way it's roughly going to stay. I just can't see a 7 appearing. I really can't. Now, on the Washington offensive side of things, we must note their right guard, Sam Cosmi, is out for the season. Trent Scott, who is typically a tackle, he will fill in at guard. On the Eagles defensive side of things, Nakobe Dean is on IR. Oren Burks will step up into the starting linebacker role. Quinion Mitchell is okay. Didn't show up on the injury report. He left last week's game, obviously, with the shoulder injury. Keep an eye on that in-game. You don't have to strictly bet pregame. Injuries matter in-game as well. And with the way that the Eagles corners match up well, in my opinion, against the Washington wide receivers, any cornerback injury could change things significantly for a Washington wide receiver. Now, again, to go back to Stephen Robinson's message about Washington, I think it's definitely incredibly enticing to get this amount of points with a quarterback, the better quarterback, in my opinion, in this matchup, who's playing really well against a quarterback on the other side where there is some built-in uncertainty. Jaden Daniels, for all the like fade the rookie in the playoffs trends and stuff like that, has not looked like a rookie whatsoever. Extremely good pocket presence. Now, it should be noted, he's faced the Tampa Bay secondary and the Detroit secondary in the last 2 weeks. And this is going to be a substantial upgrade on defense for this particular game. But with that said, we saw this matchup. I mean, it's about a month and a half ago now. And Jalen Hurts got injured in the game. He got concussed. That was the Kenny Pickett game. Commies won that game 36-33 in Washington. But in that game, Jaden Daniels had a 16.4 EPA, which is a 90th percentile quarterback game. That's including the turnovers. He had 2 interceptions in that game. In fact, Washington had 5 turnovers in total, 2 interceptions, 3 fumbles. Still came away with the win. On late down passes, has been consistent with the team all year, 55% success rate, 0.91 EPA per play. Again, high leverage situations, getting to late downs, succeeding. And that was a big game from these Washington wide receivers. Zacchaeus went 5 for 70 and 2 touchdowns. McLaurin went 5 for 60 and a touchdown. Even De'Ami Brown, 4 for 56. So their top 3 receivers, 56 yards or more. Now, score effects matter. Washington trailed 14-0. They trailed 21-7. They were down 27-14 entering the fourth quarter. They had to throw the ball, but they did have some success, more success than most teams have had against the secondary this year. And if you go back to the Thursday Night Football game earlier in the year, where the Washington offense didn't look great, you do kind of have a built-in excuse, which is that Jaden Daniels was hurt in that game. So it's really hard to know what to expect. Cosme being out on the O-line is big. I did mention Trent Scott came in last week, played well against Detroit. Detroit's front seven, especially on the, I don't want to say especially on the interior. They do have good interior players, but more so better at stopping the run than pass rush. This is a different animal. So it'll be interesting to see how that holds up because Jalen Carter is excellent. We've seen teams double him throughout the playoffs. Milton Williams is one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the league, in my opinion. So got to keep an eye on that matchup and how it's going in the early going. It helps that Jaden Daniels is a mobile quarterback, but he could come up under some duress up the middle of the field. In a similar vein, Brian Robinson got it going last week against Detroit. A little bit surprised about that. He had been trending downhill and got a bit of a bump. Detroit's front seven, decent at stopping the run, but they were missing a bunch of bodies, and eventually it catches up. To me, that's going to be very important for this game because Washington wants to get into those manageable third down and even fourth down situations, right? They're not strictly looking for explosive plays. It's kind of, and that's not to say that they can't generate them. We've seen that many times this year, but they got to get something out of Robinson and Eckler on the ground because they want to find themselves in those third and shorts, especially in a road game here. Especially in a road game. TY says, do you think Deron Payne being out matters? Okay, let's flip to the other side. So first and foremost, Deron Payne is out. That was not expected earlier in the week. Just kind of kept trending downhill. Officially ruled out yesterday. I do think that matters. Washington's run defense has been a lot better with him on the field. We saw that against the Bucs in the first round of the playoffs. That's ultimately going to hurt. Cam Jurgens, the center for Philadelphia, trending towards playing or expected to play. He's dealing with a back injury. Now, we saw a lot of practice this week where Landon Dickerson, their left guard, moved over to center. Very good interior lineman. And Tyler Steen played guard. Jurgens being out would be big. Those matter, Payne and Jurgens in the grand scheme of things. But ultimately, what's going to matter the most here is how do you account for Jalen Hurts? In the sense of, does anybody know what Hurts is going to look like in this particular game? Because if I'm laying 6 on the Eagles, I want to know that Hurts is mobile, and that he can run the ball. He can use his legs. What we know is that he will be wearing a knee brace for the game. There's been all sorts of videos of him at practice. The problem with watching practice videos is you never know how hard the quarterback is pushing it. I will say, from watching Hurts practice videos, he looks fine, but game situations are completely different. And that, to me, is the hesitation with betting Philly. For those who bet Philly early, -4.5, well, the market has said you got a good number. It's at 6 right now. You've kind of done your job. At this point now, I would be less inclined to bet Philadelphia with that built-in uncertainty at quarterback. Now on the run side of things for the Eagles offense, Cleve TA, who's part of our team here at Forward Progress, did some pretty good analysis on the first couple of games that these teams played, and particularly Saquon Barkley, because I've seen this talked about a lot this week, how he's dominated Washington in the 2 games he's played. So he's ran for 146 yards, 150 yards, 4 touchdowns, 296 and 4 touchdowns in 2 games against Washington. But it's a little bit misleading, because when you really break it down on a play-by-play basis, the first game, Barkley was held to 42% success rate. The second game, he was held to 34% success rate. Now, again, that's a titch lower than you would expect. Part of that was Pickett was in the game. Washington could focus a little bit more on stopping the run. Ultimately, in each of those games, he ended up breaking off a longer touchdown, and that makes up over 100 of his total rush yards in those games. So if you were to just strip those out, and again, I'm not saying they don't count. They definitely do count. But just to illustrate the point, if you take out the 2 long touchdown runs, 1 in each game, he ends up with 3.6 yards per carry on 53 attempts. And Washington's defense actually looks like it held up. The challenge is, can they not give up those explosive runs? With Deron Payne being out, that's going to be a little bit harder. This is not a team that typically stacks the box a whole ton, but might see a different game plan today because of the Jalen Hurts injury. There's a possibility in the early going that Washington just says, you know what, let's let the injured quarterback beat us and let's shut down this running game as best we can. Well, that leads to a few things, probably a lower success rate for Barkley, but also the possibility of long runs when you really stack the box and Barkley gets to the second level. So really tough. Ultimately, if the commies do try to limit Barkley, they're going to have one-on-one on the outside against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. That's also a bad matchup, presuming that Hurts can make the throws. A.J. Brown has always destroyed man coverage, always. Probably will see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore in this game. I will say, for all the talk about how Marshawn Lattimore has been poor this year, he has been injured since coming over. He's still a very decent cornerback. Don't love the matchup necessarily, but he'll be one-on-one, Devontae Smith one-on-one. There's lots of ways that the Eagles can beat you. That's the difference to me in the game, right? There's just so many ways that I think the Eagles can win offensively, whereas the Commanders feels to me like they have to play a more perfect game. So I see a lot of questions about props in this particular game. I'll go prop by prop right at the end of this, but I just want to get the 2 game breakdowns out of the way. For me, where the market is now, you can get a pretty decent pop on every clip. It's probably a good number. You saw my numbers on screen. I'm very close to this as well. One of the reasons I didn't bet it. Full disclosure, had Jalen Hurts not suffered an injury last week, I would be a little bit more optimistic about this matchup for the Eagles. And maybe I look back on this at the end of the day today and be like, well, Rob, you're a complete idiot. The signs were always there. Eagles can move the ball however they want. This isn't a good Commanders defense. And that's certainly within the realm of possibility for this game. I'm not suggesting it's not, but when we're betting dollars, we can choose to pass. We can choose to say there's too much variance or unknown here for me to want to place this bet. And as we stand here on Sunday morning, I'm in the boat of I just don't know what to do. Just don't know what to do. Our second game, 6:30 Eastern time today. There's going to be a live watch along for this game right here on Forward Progress, hosted by my producer, Jason Cooper, Hitman, Suma, Judah, joining throughout. Make sure you tune in for that live watch along. But before we get into that second game, Only 4 teams remain in the NFL playoffs. As you watch and look to place your bets, know that there is no better place to bet on these games than at Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Big fan of Fanduel as a product. You'll see when we go through the props here how many times they have the best number in market, especially on these touchdown score props today. If you're firing on those, definitely want to bet on Fanduel. And right now, all customers can pump up their gridiron winnings with a profit boost token on any 3+ leg SGP on one of the games today. 3+ legs, you get a profit boost token on either one of the games. FanDuel has tons of ways you can get in on the action. You can bet money line, spreads, player props, and more. Plus, with super simple live betting, lightning fast bet settlement, and instant withdrawals, FanDuel makes betting on the NFL easier than ever before. Just visit fanduel.com/forward-progress to download FanDuel today. You must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration. See terms for offers at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Kevin saying lasagna or stuffed manicotti. Neither today. No pastas today. No pastas. Pizza, wings, an assortment of things, but not breaking out the pastas. I love this comment by Jeffrey, referring to Jason hosting this afternoon. Join him. Roast them if you want to in the chat, but actually don't roast them too hard. It does have that quick trigger finger. You might find yourself in a timeout. Okay. Bills Chiefs. I don't want to understate the Eagles Commanders. I am looking forward to that game, but this is the game. No weather concerns. It's cold. Temperatures around freezing. Winds low. Not going to snow. No rain. Weather not having an impact on this game. Of note, again, this is a total that has steamed in market. Money coming in on the under from where it was earlier in this week. Did talk about that on when we got our first looks at these totals for this upcoming week. I thought 47.5 was a little bit too low. It's been bet up now to 48.5 juiced over at FanDuel. Market making books 49.5. So definitely plenty of money on the over here this morning. The line is kind of held in the spot that we've seen it at all week, with Kansas City as a small favorite. Start with the Buffalo offense. So there's been a lot of talk this week about how Kansas City is a very good run defense. And from a season-long perspective, that's true, but it is a little bit misleading. They did fall off as the season went on. So their overall EPA and success rate numbers are probably not indicative of the current defense. They can be run on. That's not to say that this is brutal, a defense or anything, but it's been overstated in my opinion. Also, they didn't get many looks at mobile quarterbacks this year. They got Lamar in week 1, 122 rushing yards, with basically a whole offseason to plan for him. They got Allen in the game they lost in Buffalo, 30-21. He went for 55 yards and a touchdown. Other than that, like Bo Nix a couple times, not sure that you would put him in that same category. And it's kind of concerning because they play a top 10 rate of man coverage. That's kind of been a Spagnuolo thing for a while. Lots of disguised coverages, but they end up in man a lot. I'd be a little bit concerned about that against Allen, especially if they're going to play man and blitz in high leverage situations. Now, I do think Buffalo's offense has a pretty high floor. This is one point I've been making over the course of the week here. I mean, just look at the scores of their games. It's not hard to do, but they've scored 24 points or more in 12 straight games. It's not like they've been playing a bunch of sieve defenses either. Back-to-back, they've played, from an EPA perspective, 2 of the top 3 defenses in the league in Denver, Baltimore. They didn't really even play well against Baltimore offensively. They still put up 27. So I think the floor is pretty high. I think that's one of the reasons why you may see the game day steam towards the over in this game. Allen's sack avoidance will be big against this defense. Like I said, Spags will keep you guessing. He does find ways to get to the quarterback, though. We saw that against Houston last week. Different animal. The Houston offense is not the Buffalo offense. But as that game went on, Spags was in his bag. Early on, you thought, okay, Houston here, maybe they got a shot to do something. As that game went on, adjustments were made. They got nothing going. CJ Stroud, deer in the headlights. The Buffalo pass offense versus the KC pass D, in my opinion, could go either way. Allen was great in the first matchup. 15.7 EPA. That's 89th percentile quarterback play. But let me choose my words carefully here. I was going to say that could be bad. And let me just clarify on that. I talked about this last week, and it's something that I studied in the offseason this year. But Buffalo already beat Kansas City in their one regular season matchup this year. And if you do some historical analysis on these types of situations where the teams meet again in the playoffs, you typically don't get as much success from the offense as the first time around. And part of the reason why is there's a pretty high correlation to the way that they ran their offense in the previous game. So if you just think about this from a logic, human perspective, Buffalo played a great game. They beat Kansas City 30-21. What are they most inclined to do when they're prepping for this week's game? Mimic that game plan. They're very inclined to do the stuff that worked for them the first time around, whereas Kansas City is now watching that tape and they're trying to stop Buffalo from doing that. There tends to not be too many surprises in the overall game plan. And that's always been a leg up for the team that lost. And when you have two teams that are pretty close to on par, at least the way that the market is rating them, that could be a very slight difference maker in the game. So of note, it couldn't happen. Buffalo's offense is great. Josh Allen, top 2 quarterback in the league. But I don't know that a 15.7 EPA game is necessarily I don't want to say it's not on the table. Say the probability of that happening is much lower today. Brandon says Mahomes threw 2 picks in that game. Good luck replicating that in the playoffs. Okay, I do want to get to that now. So let's flip to the other side. Of note, Taylor Rapp is out at safety for Buffalo. Cole Bishop will step in. Christian Benford is trending towards playing today. That is a big piece of news because Christian Benford is a really good corner. And Buffalo doesn't have a lot of great depth at like Kaiir Elam or Cam Lewis would have to step in, and that could be a disaster against one of these speedy Chiefs receivers on the outside. Kansas City's offense sucked against the Texans. Part of the reason why was Houston's pass rushers were just eating on the outside. Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, they were in the backfield nonstop. There is a possibility that Buffalo can replicate that, especially on third downs. When you start to get out of your base defense and into your nickel and dime, that's when you see Von Miller come on the field. Greg Rousseau, Von Miller, pretty dynamic pass rushers. AJ Epinesa, not so much. Very hit or miss. Hasn't really developed into kind of a stud player on the outside. So I don't know that KC's offense is going to look like deer in the headlights like they did against Houston. They did play a really solid offensive game against Buffalo already. It was mentioned in the chat, 2 interceptions for Mahomes in that game. That was basically the difference, right? They had a 53% success rate running the ball, 50% success rate passing the ball. That was a game with no Hollywood Brown, no Isaiah Pacheco. The left tackle situation was a disaster. Joe Thuney is playing there now, and he's gotten better and better since he's taken over at left tackle. That 2 INTs for Mahomes, he hasn't turned it over in 8 straight games since. Like that is the outlier game. Now, the Bills were also missing some defenders in that game, but I do remain pessimistic about their defense overall because they've benefited a lot from, I'm going to say turnover luck this year, but I am going to put a little asterisk there, because they've created 26 fumbles on defense this year. That's the most in the NFL. That heavily skews their EPA. For those who follow the EPA metric, turnovers are weighted in there, and that brings Buffalo way up the charts. Now, I don't believe that all these fumbles are luck. I believe that there is an art to creating fumbles. We used to think, this is the analytics from years ago, that it was all. Now, there's certain teams that are coaching to go after the ball, to punch the ball out, things of that nature. Buffalo especially does this a ton. You will notice it in today's game, especially if there's a receiver or a running back is already wrapped. So I don't want to say that it's all luck, but if you just strip out those turnovers from their EPA, Buffalo would have a bottom 5 defense. We went around the league. We said turnovers are not part of the EPA metric. Buffalo's a bottom 5 defense. And that is concerning for me because all year they've benefited from these turnovers. And in a game where they are, I don't want to say unlikely to get them, but they're facing a team that has prioritized not turning the ball over, that could be a real challenge. You look back to last week's game against Baltimore. Why did Buffalo win that game? It was turnovers. The Ravens didn't punt a single time in the game. Lamar overthrew a receiver downfield. I'll call that a self-inflicted mistake. His fumble, very self-inflicted mistake. It was the Mark Andrews fumble over the middle of the field. That's 3 in the game. Ultimately, when I do look at the game, I think both offenses have a good chance to nickel and dime their way to success. That's not to say we're not going to see explosive plays, or I just think you will see both offenses operate at a high success rate. And when it comes down to things, I love this tweet from NFL Pinnacle Beater yesterday, which was like, just say you like the Chiefs because Mahomes is great in high pressure situations in the playoffs. Like, that is a reason to be willing to bet the Chiefs. And that's kind of where I'm at here. I didn't bet them in the game, but ultimately trust in Mahomes until proven otherwise, right? Like, I don't want to pick the point where they're going to fall on the knife. It feels like I'd be reliving mistakes from the Brady era in New England. Trust in Mahomes till proven otherwise. Diggs, who I had on Circles Off last week. If you haven't seen that interview, check it out on Circles Off. Great NFL bettor. I mean, he's Chiefs fan, but he's constantly posting data. I mean, you look at the past 6 seasons, 3rd and 7+ in the NFL. Mahomes has a 0.398 EPA per play. That is absurd. The next highest quarterback is Justin Herbert, less than half the EPA per play. So I get it. I understand the public sentiment in this game. Everyone feels like KC always gets the calls. You're sick of seeing KC in the Super Bowl. I get all of that. You'd have to give me a 3 to bet Buffalo in this game. You'd have to give me a 3. At this price, it would only be KC for me. At this point, I directionally lean that way. It would only be Kansas City for me. I think sometimes we just overthink it. Now, granted, last time these teams played, the handicap was the same. It's like Mahomes in a close game. I'm going to take Mahomes. They lost, and that can certainly happen. But that's that. I mean, here it is. I love this meme, by the way. Huge fan of it. Carlos says, great interview with Diggs. Rob, appreciate that very much. Sometimes these guys make it easy. They just have a lot to say, and you throw it over to them. And like I said, had a lot to say. Okay, props-wise, I will go team by team again. So just getting into it a little bit more. Generally, you're going to bet more unders than overs today, just because, I mean, you could do this cross comparison yourself as well, but there's a lot of players that have been bumped up. We don't have crazy totals here. We have 47, 49.5. But on a week-to-week basis, you kind of chart a lot of the skill position players. They tend to be around an even line over the course of the year, maybe some fluctuations. We're seeing a lot of players that have been bumped up in pricing generally. So that's where we're at with this particular game. So let's go. I'll go team by team. So let me start with the Buffalo Bills, just because we'll go alphabetical order here. Not a ton that I really love with the Bills Chiefs game relative to Philly Washington, I would say. And let me just do standard player props here, and then we'll get into some touchdown score stuff after this. But Dalton Kincaid, great matchup. Everyone's talking about the matchup that Dalton Kincaid has, this and that, right? I'm not a big believer in just like magically flipping a switch. And the problem with Kincaid, and when he gets lined at like 3.5 receptions, granted, this is pretty heavily juiced towards the under, is that he's just not getting the snaps. He's not on the field for enough snaps. So yeah, it's a great matchup, but Buffalo's probably trying to run the ball as much as possible. That's been their MO, their bread and butter. When we were looking at Kincaid, relative, like he's still getting less snaps than Dawson Knox every single game. Last 2 games, average of 30 snaps. I don't, and like so many of those snaps are run plays as well. I lean under on Kincaid in the receptions market. I think that's one look. Similarly, Curtis Samuel in the receptions market, you can find some pretty good plus money on the under 1.5 receptions. We kind of know how the receiver situation is going to shape up for Buffalo at this point. Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman are going to get the majority of snaps. Mac Hollins has seen a huge uptick in snaps. The forgotten guy is Amari Cooper. If I had to venture a guess, Cooper's going to get more snaps than Samuel. So we're essentially looking at a 5th receiver in Curtis Samuel with plus money on under 1.5 receptions. I think that's worth a look as well on the Buffalo side. There's not much that I would really look at in terms of overs for the Bills. I do view this as like there's more recreational money going into the markets today than past weeks, and there will be more for the Super Bowl as well. And there's just too many players that I look across the board. I'm like, these numbers are too high. Those are the 2 that stand out, Kincaid and Samuel. You could talk to me about matchups, but again, you got to be on the field. I will say, I said I was going to go back and forth to touchdown markets. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm just going to, if I was going to play one person to score a touchdown on the Bills, it's actually Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox has been getting out there. Let me just double check that he's still plus 750, which is what I saw this morning really quickly. But he's out there on the field a lot. They're going heavy in goal line personnel, red zone personnel. We did see them elevate another offensive lineman from the practice squad. Again, another indicator to me that Buffalo is going to try to run the ball as effectively as possible, keep Mahomes off the field. Dawson Knox, anytime touchdown at Fanduel, still 750. That's the best in market. That's the guy I would target from the Bills side of things. I think Knox remains undervalued. Kincaid remains overvalued, purely because of like where they were drafted, like fantasy wise, things going into the year. That's the Bills. Chiefs. The Chiefs are, I got almost no opinions on Kansas City. A few things actually though. Travis Kelce under on receiving yards. Had his monstrous game last week. You tend to see an overreaction to those types of situations. There are 70.5s out there. And by the way, you should bet at FanDuel. You should also bet wherever you can get the best prices. On top of that, FanDuel should 100% be one of your books. But if you can get a 70.5, it makes a difference, in my opinion. I would look unders on Travis Kelce. He's not really that explosive a player. It was kind of weird to see him go off and have like runs in the open field last week. I could see this being a game where he's targeted a lot, but from that receiving yards point of view, it's too high. Some gut leans to playing Isaiah Pacheco alternate overs in this game. And this is the one where I can't really back it with any sort of facts. and I am pretty much rooted in facts quite a bit here and statistical analysis. I thought last week would be the ramp-up game for Pacheco. Came back in week 13, has been roughly getting, let's say, 30 to 40% of snaps. He started last week, and his first 2 runs were very ineffective. And then Kareem Hunt came in and kind of took over. And I feel like, again, I'm just throwing it out there. This is a gut-based, feel-based type of thing. I feel like had he had a few more successful runs in the early going, they would have leaned on him more than Kareem Hunt in that game. Because of that, because of the fact I don't trust the Bills' run defense, I think some Pacheco alts are worthwhile. Johnny C says he's still got to be banged up. So my only hesitation with this is that there would have been no reason to bring him back in week 13 if he wasn't healthy. Like, they could have just kept him sitting. They were well on their way to winning, getting the number 1 seed already. They were going to win the division. They rested him in week 18 and 19. I don't know at this point. It's a decent thought, but I'm not sure that I necessarily am buying it. Anyways, that's an alternate look in some capacity. Don't go nuts with it. You're getting some plus money value looks on there. I don't mind Pacheco. In the touchdown market, I did give Pacheco as a look at plus 220 earlier this week here on Forward Progress, down to plus 200, best price in market now. That difference is enough for me to say, okay, like, you don't need to bet that anymore. It does. I mean, Marquise Brown at plus 270 seems like 280. Sorry, just delayed here. Seems like the best option to me on the Chiefs side of things. Not super enthused about that, but that seems like the best option there. All right. The earlier games, Philly and Washington. So let's start on the Philly side of things. I will give one over. Devontae Smith over on receptions is roughly plus 130 in market right now. Best price available. I think Devontae Smith is going to see a lot of one-on-one in this game. A lot of man coverage as well. That number with the plus attached to it on the over is something that I think is definitely worth looking at. I'm also not so keen on Dallas Goedert in this game because he was carrying a pre-existing injury into it. I generally like to play guys that have appeared on the injury report, didn't practice over the course of the week, towards the under, because there is a non-zero chance that they leave the game with injury. So Goedert receiving yards and receptions seem a little bit too high to me in this game. So I like Devontae Smith in this matchup. Goedert unders. I know some people who played Hurts overs, which, you're looking at 190s now. I just don't want to I don't have that appetite for risk. Just mentioning it because I have seen it played a bunch. I don't like a single player in the Philadelphia touchdown scorer market. Now, before someone gets on my case here, remember, this game was steamed towards the under. And the touchdown score odds are not really moving based off of that. We get down to 47. That's a key number. I don't think that you need to. I don't think you need to go nuts here with any sort of touchdown stuff. And especially since Philly skews so top heavy with Barkley at minus 250, which I would never bet. Hurts, I could not bet the minus there with the knee injury as well. That's that. On the Washington side, Hitman's talked a lot about it this week. Definitely tailed on De'Ami Brown unders, both receptions and receiving yards. Tougher matchup. He's been now elevated quite a bit in market. A few weeks back, we were looking at De'Ami Brown at like 2.5 receptions, juiced under the same way. Also, receiving yards was in the mid-20s. We're now up to like low 40s, high 30s. Too much. Love De'Ami Brown. He's been our guy here on Forward Progress. But now is the time to reverse that. In a similar vein, Zach Ertz, a little bit. I know some of the feeling is that, okay, these corners are good for the Eagles. I mean, I could get Zach Ertz under 3.5 receptions plus money. That seems worthwhile as well. I'm going to give a touchdown score in this game at Fanduel that you may laugh at. I don't really care. It's probably going to lose. In fact, it's going to lose like, I'm going to say it's going to win, let's say 1 out of every 35 times or so. I'm going to go with Luke McCaffrey anytime touchdown at 60-1. Luke McCaffrey is the 5th wide receiver for Washington. I'm not an idiot. He's not going to get very many snaps. We saw him go from, I think it was 17 snaps against Tampa Bay. Let me just double check that. Yep. To 8 snaps last week because Jamison Crowder got many more. This is just relative to price. You're going to get a wide receiver that is going to be on the field for roughly 10 snaps in this game. If they're trailing, it might be even more. 15. You have some special teams options available to you. You're always going to want to double check house rules, by the way, on any sort of special teams touchdown. Just word of advice on that. But 60-1 FanDuel, Luke McCaffrey. Click it. Way too high. This is what I'm talking about when you got to bet, you got to have a FanDuel account sometimes, because nowhere else is offering anywhere close to that. Okay. That's mostly it for props. I do want to highlight, I love to highlight whenever FanDuel has really, really good prices on stuff. If you're looking for Patrick Mahomes rushing yardage, I know a lot of people like this angle in the playoffs where they play quarterbacks over. You should definitely play that at FanDuel at 22.5 minus 110. That's Mahomes over rushing yards. Way better price. They have best price in market on Isaiah Pacheco over on receiving yards. So if you buy into him potentially playing more there, 4.5 minus 105 is a really good price. Touchdown score market, I could identify 80% of the board because they have the best prices there over and over. Any good tackles, assist props? So I'll be honest with you, Kevin. I don't bet these unless I usually just take shots on these wherever I find like an off-market type of price. If I'm looking at the board today, there's a few spots. No, I'm not going. I don't really like anything there, honestly. I don't. I had some looks earlier in the week on Zach Bond. Don't see the numbers available anymore. I don't want to go there either as well. All right. Just quick questions from here. Barkley under 2. I think he meant 127 rush yards. I could only look to Barkley unders. I would not play the over today. Hollywood Brown over 38.5. I'm indifferent on that. I'm indifferent just because KC rotates in and out so many wide receivers. I do like the matchup for Brown. No strong feeling. Thought on Brian Robinson props, over rushing attempts, over half receptions. Judah made a case for the Brian Robinson rushing props on Forward Progress this week. I'm not there. I think him and Eckler are kind of priced where they needed to. Steven says Hitman loves Hollywood in this game. Yes, he does. Sure does. G42, 421. Hurts rush yards over? No. I'm not playing anything related to Hurts overs with pre-existing injury. Rashid says, talk about your Spaces mic drop. You can tune in to Circle Back on Tuesday. I can guarantee you we're going to talk about the Twitter Spaces that have been happening. That'll be over on the Circles Off channel. All right. I think I've covered these as best as I can. At this point, if I didn't talk a prop, you can probably just assume that. I mean, listen, I could give you stuff that I was borderline on. I was borderline on Khalil Shakir under receiving yards. I was borderline on, honestly, Hurts over passing yards. I just chose not to play it because of the pre-existing injury. I was borderline on Eckler receiving yards. Now that we're at 25.5. Side of that, not a ton. Teaser. I don't think you should play a teaser today. I don't. There are some cases where you can play teasers where you don't tease through 7 and 3 and it could still be plus EV. I know everyone's playing the same teaser, which is Eagles and Bills, because there's only 2 games. But the reality is, if these were regular season games, you're probably not betting these. Also, with the Eagles game, you have a quarterback who had a pre-existing injury. That's not a game that I would want to tease at all. Kelsey anti-correlation receiving SGP. Like that look. I like that. That's a decent idea, which is playing Kelsey under on his receiving yards and then starting to look for alt overs. We actually almost hit one of those earlier in the year. Maybe it wasn't that close, but we were very live on one of those earlier in the year for sure. Who would the Eagles, Commanders rather face in the Super Bowl, Bills or Chiefs? I would venture a guess that nobody wants to face the Chiefs. That would be my thoughts. Early Bird says Commanders alts today. Hurts injury risk, not being able to play from behind. We haven't seen that a lot this year. It's a valid point. It is a valid point. Brandon says open leg Bills teasers aren't the worst. You might get yourself into a situation, though, where Washington is in the Super Bowl and then you have Kansas City or Buffalo as like a 4.5 point favorite. 4.5, roughly. I don't know what the look aheads were. I honestly didn't look at that. And then you're like, you don't really have good teaser options next week as well. All right. Mark, you can bet your money however you want to. I'm not singling you out. Tons of people have asked this question, and I've chosen to ignore it for a while. Don't play totals and teasers. Just really, mathematically, if you play totals and teasers over the long run, you are making some really, really bad bets. There's lots of literature on this online. And in fact, I might do a video on this at some point or another. But the value of the points that you're teasing through on totals is nowhere near the value of the points on sides. So just be really, really hesitant about teasing totals in the NFL. Dominic Walton says, what props do you have your eye on to jump at for games once they're live? So first and foremost, you're always looking for in-game injuries, especially guys who went in with injuries, right? Like Dallas Goedert would be a guy that I'm looking at to see how he's moving on the field. Jalen Hurts, obviously everyone's going to be watching that in some capacity. Those are the types of situations I'm looking for. Christian Benford, if he were to go out of the game at all. Quinion Mitchell, if he were going to go out of the game at all. You're starting to look at the receivers that they're lining up across as well. So those are mostly the angles that I look at in game. And I think those make a huge difference. Huge difference. All right. That's going to be it for me. Make sure you check out Fanduel, of course, and make sure you're back here today, 6:30, 6:15 Eastern time. Jason, Suma, Hitman, Judah, and more. You may or may not hear from me on Twitter today. I don't know what on Feinberg. There we go. Thank you very much. That's a live watch along of Bills and Chiefs. If you got nothing else to do, tune in. Those are always fun. I might actually, if I'm not in too bad shape, I might check in really quickly. I might be in really bad shape by then, though. Championship Sunday with the friends might be a colossal disaster. Whatever you're cheering for today, as long as you're not opposite me, good luck with your bets. Tune in today, 6:15 Eastern time with Jason. Follow our Twitter account at FWD Progress HQ. We'll be announcing our prop show for the Super Bowl next week. It's going to be a 5-hour live prop show. You're going to want to know the time. You're going to want to set notifications. Be subbed here on Forward Progress. Everyone, thank you very much for watching the Pizza Buffet here on Forward Progress, presented by FanDuel. Peace out. Enjoy the day, everyone. Let's watch some football. Let's cash some bets.